Good morning, class. Today there will be no Zoom. You're going to go in here and you're going to go down to week 16. And then on Thursday, December 17th, you click on, there's a couple of things here. It looks like a lot, but it's not really. You've got the attendance check in. I'm just asking him, what's your favorite food? Um, and then that just gives you an attendance check in. Okay. And then here is our Constitution reteach. If most of you took the test yesterday, if you did not, then please take that today. But in any event, this Constitution reteach, the article is right here. It's also embedded in there, but here's the article. This one's in Spanish if you prefer Spanish. But you're going to read that, and then you're going to get anywhere from 5 to 10 points on your test grade for basically for doing this assignment. 5 points for just doing it, and then we're ranging up to 10. And then if it's really good, maybe I'll even give you a little more than 10. But here's the questions right here. Um, and I kind of did a couple of them already for you. I prefer you do something, that helps me see it a little better. But then you can raise that one up, and then if we go down here, you can also see them right here if you can download if you want to download them. Um, it's probably a little bit easier. I'm going to go back to my portal and just go back to here. Um, and let's see, go back to second quarter. Week 16, and then I'm gonna pull up the assignment here, or the reading. And so here's the article. And so if you have the article here, and I move this over, now I can go back and forth between them if I so choose. Back and forth. That's probably the easier way to do it. Okay, so if I look at this, I'm going to read this for those of you that don't that like to have it read. This is conceived of compromises, creating the U.S. Constitution. Um, the American Revolution ended in 1783. Before the Revolution, America was controlled by the British. After a hard war, Americans were able to send away the British Army. Now, leaders of the new United States had to think of a new government. In 1787, the U.S. was made up of 13 states. All states had to agree on how they wanted to run the country. They came together to write a new law of the land called the Constitution. This meeting was called the Constitutional Convention. So then, normally, after each one of these little paragraphs, when they get a new heading, I've given you a question. So this first one says, what is the Constitution? I already did that one for you, and it's right here to write the new law of the land. Okay, now the second one I think I did for you as well. Yeah, it says at the Constitutional Convention, what did the leaders want to give more power? And it says the federal government. So this one would be under Constitutional Convention, that would be that question. So it says each US state has its own state government. Along with state governments, the country also has one national government. Before the Constitution, the country already had a set of laws. They were called the Articles of Confederation. These laws gave states more power than the national government. For example, the national government could ask a state to pay tax money, however, it could not force the states to pay it. At the Constitutional Convention, leaders of the country talked about giving the government more power. They wrote new laws as a list of articles. Okay, now we get into separation of powers. And I'm going to go back and look at my thing. It says the separation of powers provided the roles for each branch of government. What is the role of the legislative branch? So I'm looking here as I read this, I'm looking at what the legislative branch does. It says Article 1 of the Constitution says that the U.S. government should have a Congress. You hear my puppies over there. We got three of them running around, so I apologize. Let me try and talk over them. It's like having a junior high classroom during the non-COVID days. Article 1 of the Constitution says that the U.S. government should have a Congress. This is the part of government that makes laws. Congress is split into two houses. One house is called the Senate, the other is the House of Representatives. So that's the legislative branch, which is what we asked about. So this section here is going to give you the answer. This Article 1. Article 2 states the powers of the president. Article 3 describes the Supreme Court. This court is made up of expert judges. Together, they make sure the rest of the government follows the Constitution. Okay, so now we go to checks and balances, and we look at this and says, what was the purpose of the checks and balances? And provide an example of a specific check and balance from the reading. Okay, so now I'm looking at two questions for checks and balances. I want to know what the purpose of it was, and then give me a specific example from the reading. The founders of the United States were careful. They did not want to give the national government too much power. That's kind of the purpose, guys. Well, the purpose of checks and balances was so that the national government would not have too much power. America's founders built a system with many parts or branches. Each branch can check the powers of the other branch. For example, state lawmakers may try to make a law, but the president can say no to that law. We call that a veto. Every law also has to respect the Constitution. If it does not, the Supreme Court can reject it or not allow it. Okay, so those are the two questions you got there. Now we go down to why were the small states worried about the big states? Okay, big and small states. Almost every state took part in the Constitutional Convention. The leaders who went were called delegates. For example, James Madison and George Washington went for the state of Virginia. Washington had fought in the American Revolution. He was a respected Army general. Pennsylvania sent Benjamin Franklin. He was a smart and famous inventor. Madison offered a first plan for the new government. His idea was called the Virginia Plan. Madison's plan gave the national government more power than the states. It also separated the national government into three parts. One part made laws, another made sure laws were followed, a third carried out trials if people broke the laws. Those are the three branches that we know today. The plan is close to what the U.S. has today. Congress is the part that makes laws. The president makes sure laws are followed, and the Supreme Court puts people on trial if they do not respect the law. Still, Madison's plan had a problem. The more people a state had, the more lawmakers it could have in Congress. These states would have more power than other smaller states. So, in other words, the big states had more power than the small states under this plan. So, similar states offered their own plans. They proposed the New Jersey plan, where each state only had one vote in Congress. This way, all states would have equal power. But the big states didn't like that because that meant that the people in the small states had more power. So the question comes back here and it says, why were the small states worried about big states? They were worried that they were worried that they would have too much political power, the big states. So they had to compromise. Finally, the state leaders were able to agree. We got a little battle over here with my puppies. Okay. Finally, the state leaders were able to agree. The Senate would have two people for each state. Small states and large states would both have the same number of lawmakers. In the House of Representatives, each state would have a different number of lawmakers. States with more people could have more lawmakers. So now you see how did they fix the problem? They fixed the problem by having two parts of Congress. One where you did it by population and another where you did it where everybody was equal. And then the last part was this egregious, terrible thing that we did for the slave states. And that is, in the end, wait, here it is. So still there were a few other problems. States in the South had slavery. Slave is a person who is forced to work for free. Southern states wanted to keep having slaves. States in the North wanted slavery to be against the law. In the end, the delegates wanted to agree on a constitution. States with slaves and states without slaves had to come together, so the delegates let slavery continue. If a state had more people, it could have more lawmakers in Congress. Slave owners wanted their slaves to be counted. Why? Because now all of a sudden they're afraid that they'll have less power because so they did something that, quite frankly, is crazy and just I don't know how anybody could have done this, but they did it. It meant that states with slaves could have more power because states without slaves would have less power if they didn't count them in the population. So how would you count them in the population? The delegates decided on a new rule. It would take 5 slaves to count as 3 non-slaves. We called this the three-fifths compromise. That meant that slaves were worth 3/5 of a person. Probably one of the worst things that has ever come from our Constitution. But that's what they did, and that's how they got the compromise. And they did that all because they wanted to have as much political power as they could. After years of planning, the new Constitution was signed. A small group of national leaders had created a new government. To this day, the United States Constitution is the longest lasting written Constitution in history. So there you have it. You finish this, you'll get points on your test. We're really focused for y'all. Really, I'm really going to be looking at this checks and balance and separation of powers because that's the part where some of us messed up on the test, and this is the reteach opportunity. This other stuff on the big and small states is just meant to help you going into 8th grade. Y'all have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow when we're going to make ornaments, and then we'll have a nice break. So, have a great day.